A massive international aid and rescue effort is underway in Nepal, following a devastating earthquake. Countries hit hard by Ebola take measures to protect children. And does Barack Obama have a future in stand-up comedy? Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Tonight, residents of Nepal are mourning their loved ones and struggling to cope with the devastation of Saturday's massive earthquake that has killed more than 4,000 people. Authorities in Nepal are scrambling to coordinate humanitarian aid and the rescue efforts of victims that may still be trapped in the rubble of collapsed buildings. VOA's Latisa Hoke has more.
Mass cremations of the earthquake victims in Nepal continued on Monday to prevent the spread of disease.
The cremation started early in the morning. The Nepalese government has ordered the cremation for 24 hours. The army has provided wood, and the bodies are being burnt at the place where they are found.
Saturday's earthquake is the worst to hit the Himalayan nation in more than 80 years. Destruction and the fear of aftershocks have sent many in the capital Kathmandu fleeing the area in overcrowded vehicles, among them out-of-town students.
This is all because of the earthquake. We are going to our home. We don't feel safe.
Many left their rattled homes to sleep under tents.
This is our third night, and it has been really hard to stay here. Our government hasn't done anything better. Only India is helping us.
India has sent helicopters, medical supplies and personnel. Many mountain climbers, including this Dutch national, were rescued by an Indian team.
He rescued me. I was hanging there someplace just to have the rocks going over me, and then he said, "You have to come." And he brought me to a place that was just a little bit outside of all the rocks were coming down. It's very dangerous. I've been so scared. And the whole night we had these shakes, and the whole night you felt these rocks coming down. It was very, very scary.
Nepal's other neighbor, China, also was among the first to send aid. A group of Chinese volunteers arrived at the Kathmandu airport Monday.
We've just arrived and carrying body bags for those search and rescue team who have found the bodies. And also we have stretchers to evacuate those who are still alive. And then we also brought in some water filtration systems for the basic survival needs.
Aid and rescue teams from other countries also are on the way, but not all are able to land at the overcrowded Kathmandu airport. Landslides and rubble are blocking aid from reaching more remote communities, raising concerns that the number of casualties will rise once rescuers get through. Dogs are brought to sniff out survivors, among diminishing hope that any more will be found under piles of rubble. The quake was particularly destructive because it was close to the surface. Powerful tremors toppled buildings, opened gaping cracks in roads, and the initial earthquake was followed by aftershocks that added to the damage of rattled structures. Tens of thousands of Nepalese now depend on foreign aid to survive. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, the challenges facing Nepal are enormous, with early reconstruction estimates at around $5 billion. Aid workers from around the world are rushing to get into Nepal, which is set for a long and difficult recovery. Arash Arabasadi reports from Washington.
This is Nepal, just days after a 7.8 magnitude earthquake claimed at least 4,000 lives. Aid pours in from around the world, but getting help where it's needed is a challenge of its own.
The situation on the ground in Kathmandu, in all of the affected areas, is extremely chaotic in the wake of an earthquake of that magnitude.
Chris Skopek is Senior Director of Emergency Response and Preparedness at International Medical Corps. He says part of the problem is that the small airport there is overloaded.
We've had 2 flights that have had our personnel on board that have been turned back and not been able to get in. Some flights are landing, but it's hit or miss at this point.
That brings its own host of problems. Reports cite more than 7,100 injured, and by all accounts, Nepal's medical infrastructure can't handle the load. But Skopek says it's more than delivering medical supplies.
People are being displaced, and so in such a context, the availability, the potential for waterborne illnesses grows dramatically, and oftentimes we'll see even more casualties in the second wave based on preventable diseases as opposed to just the earthquake itself. So we're really looking out for the public health concerns and what can come after.
The first people, we quote first responders, are people who live there and are from there, doing everything they can to help themselves in the first several hours.
Tracy Rains is director of the International Response Center at the American Red Cross. She says communications between aid workers in Nepal is intermittent.
The system at the moment is pretty weak. It's difficult to get signals across a really mountainous country. That has not been better after this, it's been worse.
Which brings us to volunteers Glenn and Julie Bradley. The married couple of 26 years left from Washington Monday night for Istanbul on their way to Nepal.
We're going in to set up communications and computer networks, radio communications and internet.
We're initiating internet capability to have a more coordinated disaster response.
In a country with terrestrial communications challenges, building a need-based system amid a natural disaster may be one of the biggest challenges facing aid workers right now. And as more inbound flights are turned away, concern grows for those in need of immediate medical care. In Washington, Arash Arbasadi for VOA News.
Well, for more on the international relief efforts, Sanjuli Kunwar, Emergency Communications Officer, World Vision Nepal, joins us by phone from Kathmandu. Ms. Kunwar, welcome to Africa 54.
Yes, hello?
Yes, Ms. Kunwar, tell us what you have witnessed as you continue helping people on the ground. How do things look like there?
Yes, the situation is very tense because people are in need of so many things, especially shelter. And the weather conditions have not been good. It's been raining. Even today I had been to one of the most affected areas, that is Bhaktapur in Kathmandu, and it rained really heavily, and people they cannot go back to their homes because most of the homes have been damaged, and most of the houses, they have cracks on it. So as you know, the tremors are still on, so they don't have that confidence to go back to their homes. So the situation is actually getting worse because of the weather conditions.
Mm-hmm. Now,
and it's causing more panic.
Yes, now we know people are complaining that they're not getting help. Is it because the help is not being taken, or because logistically it's not just possible?
One of the reasons is because the topography of our country, because many parts have been affected and people have not been able to reach there. It is also because of the ongoing tremors that are still going on. There have been almost 100 tremors after the big earthquake. So people have not been, like even the search and rescue team, they all have not been able to go to the inner core areas. And, the people have not been able to go inside and see what the real picture is till now. Mm-hmm. So that is one of the reasons.
Yes. Now, what is the most urgent thing now that needs to be done?
The urgent need for now is definitely shelter for people, because most of the houses, people cannot go in and stay. So shelter, also because of the weather conditions, as I told you, it's been raining almost every day. So they need shelter. And another thing is drinking water. People to drinking water, they are having difficulty in getting safe drinking water in most of the places.
Well, Ms. Kunwar, thank you very much. That's Sanjuli Kunwar, an emergency communications officer with World Vision in Nepal. Now to Southeast Africa, where hundreds of people marched on the outskirts of Burundi's capital in a third day of protest against the President Pierre Nkurunziza's decision to run for a third term. Protesters gathered early Tuesday carrying banners and chanting that they will never accept a third term for Mr. Nkurunziza. The protests are the most significant political crisis in Burundi since civil war ended a decade ago, was sparked by the president's announcement on Saturday that he would run in the June 26th election. actions. Protesters ignited fires, but there was no initial indication of serious clashes between protesters and police. Officials say the unrest has left at least 3 people dead since the protest began on Sunday. Now, for more insight on the unfolding situation in Burundi, Apollinaire Niyirora, a veteran journalist, joins us by Skype phone from Bujumbura. Mr. Niyirora, welcome to Africa 54.
Yes, thank you.
Now, very briefly, help us understand why are we witnessing these very sustained demonstrations?
Well, these demonstrations that started actually on Sunday, they are signs of a protest because these demonstrations were actually announced even before, because the organizers of the demonstrations, I mean, there's some civil society organizations and some opposition parties, they said Nkurunziza cannot run the third term because he's just completing his 10 years. 10 years, that means 2 terms. I mean, because he has been in power since 2005, and now with this year, 2010, it's just 10 years that he has completed his 10 years, now, which is provided in the national constitution. They also say that these 2 terms are also provided in the Arusha Agreement for peace and the reconciliation.
Now, Apollinaire, what is his justification for wanting a 3rd term?
The justification, do you mean the justification by the ruling party or
That's correct.
The opposition?
By the ruling party.
The protesters?
Yes, by the ruling party.
Okay, by the ruling party. The ruling party says in 2005, President Pierre Nkurunziza was elected by the parliament. I mean, the National Assembly and the Senate united. So they argue that he was not elected directly by the population, what we call universal suffrage. They say this term, I mean, from 2005 to 2010 is not a term as such. So they say he didn't have enough powers on the other institutions. So they say that shouldn't be considered as a term. And then they say what should be considered as a term was the one he had from 2010 up to now, because he was elected in a universal suffrage.
Okay, Mr. Niyirora, we'll be watching the situation. Thank you very much for joining us today. Apollinaire Niyirora is a Burundi-based journalist. Now, going over to Europe, the Italian naval ships continue to rescue migrants from rickety boats trying to make the perilous crossing from North Africa to Europe. After the death of 900 migrants last weekend, European Union leaders agreed last week to triple funding for its naval search and rescue operations in the Mediterranean. While speaking to Voice of America here in Washington, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the Assistant Secretary of African Affairs at the State Department, says the United States is working with African nations to mitigate the crisis on the home front to avoid having to deal with tragedy.
We are certainly involved in that dialogue as it relates to those countries who have had immigrants involved. We've had discussions with the Nigerian government, for example, because large numbers are from Nigeria, many are from Eritrea, and it is important that, that the situation in their countries provide opportunities for them so that they don't feel the necessity to make that dangerous crossing. But if they are making that dangerous crossing, it's important that those who are assisting them, people who are clearly traffickers, are being held accountable for the conditions in which they are moving people across that channel, and be held accountable for the large numbers of deaths. We are also in discussions with the Europeans on how we can improve our response to the situation.
Well, the number of migrants reaching Italy this year is set to top last year's record of 170,000. Well, in the United States, violent street protests erupted Monday in the eastern city of Baltimore, Maryland, following the funeral of a black man who died from an injury sustained while in police custody earlier this month. Smita Nordwall has our report. Maryland Governor Larry Hogan declared a state of emergency in Baltimore, and public schools in the city are closed Tuesday. Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake, who called the rioting one of the darkest days the city has ever faced, has declared a week-long nighttime curfew. Firefighters continue to battle several blazes across Baltimore well into the pre-dawn hours Tuesday, including a church-run senior center that was still under construction.
My heart is obviously broken because somebody did not understand that we were for the community. Somebody didn't understand that we were working on behalf of the community to invest when nobody else would. We wanted not to see gentrification and further injustice, but we wanted to see this community rebuilt for the existing residents of Broadway, East Baltimore.
The violence began as hundreds of high school students marched toward a local mall after classes are dismissed for the day, then spread out across several neighborhoods, overwhelming the police department's ability to respond as the protests turned violent. Protesters looted and burned dozens of businesses and vehicles and threw rocks, bricks, bottles, and other objects at riot police. Police Commissioner Anthony Betts said 15 officers were injured in the clashes, including 6 who were hospitalized. At least 24 people were arrested. As the rioting raged late Monday night, Gray's family called for the rioters to stop.
And I'm just hurt, right? But I do not want y'all to be out here carrying on, right? I want y'all to get justice for my son, but don't do it like this here. Don't tear up the whole city, man, just for him. It's wrong.
Thousands of mourners had gathered early in the day to pay their respects to Freddie Gray, whose death has become the latest incident sparking questions and protests about interaction between minorities and police in the United States. Gray suffered severe spinal cord injuries following his arrest on April the 12th. Officials said he was not restrained properly while being transported in a police van. Police Commissioner Betts said officers were slow to recognize that Gray, who apparently had asthma, needed medical attention. 6 officers who had contact with Gray have been placed on paid administrative leave. U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who was sworn in Monday, just hours before the violence erupted, issued a statement condemning what she called the senseless act of violence by some individuals in Baltimore. The Justice Department and the FBI have launched a civil rights investigation into Gray's death. The Baltimore Police Department said more information on the case is expected. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, countries hit by Ebola start an immunization campaign. Stay with us.
Every song has a different meaning to each person that hears it and interprets it differently. Border Crossings is unique in that it lets the listeners decide what we're playing. But we bring in guests so that our audience has access to some of the biggest names in pop music today, and we reach out to the audience each and every day in different ways.
Well, it's time now for our health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu with a look at immunizations. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Vince, and hello, everyone. Final clinical trials of malaria vaccine RTS-AS01, the first to reach this stage, suggest it could help protect millions of children against malaria. But tests on 16,000 children from 7 African countries found that booster doses were of limited use and vaccines in young babies were not effective. After children aged 5 to 17 months were given 3 doses of the vaccine, while the immunization was only 46% effective effective. Data from the trial published in The Lancet showed that the success rate fell to even lower levels in younger infants. But experts say getting the vaccine this far is a scientific milestone. Now, this week is World Immunization Week. The World Health Organization says progress towards global vaccination targets for 2015 is far off track. According to the WHO, 1 in 5 children is still missing out on routine life-saving immunizations. This could avert 1.5 million deaths each year from preventable diseases. In 2013, nearly 22 million infants missed receiving the required 3 doses of diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis containing vaccines. Many of them live in the world's poorest countries. The WHO is calling for renewed effort to get progress back on course to halt the unnecessary disabilities and death caused by failure to vaccinate. Dr. Jean-Marie Okobele is the WHO's Director of Immunization, Vaccines and Biologicals.
Today, WHO is calling for the global community and countries to close immunization gaps so that every child has access to the basic vaccines that they need. And to do so, there are 3 steps that we are promoting. First, integrate immunization services with the rest of health services so that at each contact, a child may be verified for its immunization status and receive the vaccines that he or she needs. Second, we need to expand immunization services so that we reach all children no matter where they live, including in areas where we have crisis. And third, we have to make sure that vaccines are affordable and accessible to all.
And many countries worldwide have experienced large measles outbreaks in the past year, threatening efforts to achieve the Global Vaccine Action Plan target of eliminating measles in 3 WHO regions by end of 2015. Now, for the first time since the start of the Ebola outbreak, countries hit by the Ebola outbreak in West Africa are conducting major immunization campaigns to protect millions of children against preventable but potentially deadly diseases. Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea have embarked on a major nationwide immunization campaigns following a drop in Ebola cases. The 3 countries affected most by Ebola plan to vaccinate more than 3 million children against diseases such as measles and polio. The immunization initiative requires widespread education and sensitization of communities where some residents are reported to be refusing vaccines amid rumors of a deliberate plot to infect them with Ebola. Sarah Kaba heads a village health center in Gekedu, one of the earliest towns affected by the virus.
Because of Ebola, the community is wary. People are afraid to go to a health center because they think they might be suspected of having Ebola. But today, thanks to the sanitization that has been done, they have come to receive their vaccinations.
The Ebola epidemic disrupted delivery of routine childhood vaccines against diseases such as measles, polio, and meningitis. A study published last month by researchers at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health in the United States warned that measles cases could almost double in countries hardest hit by the Ebola outbreak. Guinea launched a nationwide measles campaign this month, targeting 1.3 million children ages 6 months to 9 years. Some 100,000 children were vaccinated during an initial response to a measles outbreak in February.
People are afraid because of Ebola, but with the sensitization, they can understand why the vaccination is important.
Because the immunization campaigns are taking place while the threat of Ebola remains, vaccinators have to follow strict protocols, including the use of protective gears, such as gloves and aprons, as well as regular hand washing. In Liberia, a campaign supported by UNICEF to provide measles and polio vaccinations to over 700,000 children under 5 is planned for May. And that's our Africa Health Report for today. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, Eno, thanks a lot. And I'll be sure to watch Eno Madu's Health Reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Barack Obama wows one of the toughest crowds in Washington. We'll be right back.
اللجنة الفنية المقدم بجلسة
Welcome back. Here's what's trending. U.S. President Barack Obama says he's bringing a new attitude to the final quarter of his presidency. Bucket.
Midterm elections, my advisors asked me, Mr. President, do you have a bucket list? And I said, well, I have something that rhymes with bucket list.
Well, Barack Obama talked about his new attitude at the White House Correspondents Association in Washington, D.C. The Correspondents Association dinner is the night the president does stand up comedy to raise money for scholarships for young journalists and provides tongue-in-cheek payback for those already on the job, as well as political opponents. Well, speaking of stealing the show, all eyes were on Kim Kardashian West at a women's power luncheon hosted by Variety magazine. The reality star walked a special white carpet in New York, where the entertainment trade magazine honored a group of powerful and famous women in the industry, including Kardashian West, for their philanthropic work. Kim was honored for her work with the Children's Hospital Los Angeles. During her speech, Kim said, "Here's to strong women, may we know them, may we be them, may we raise them," adding, "Never underestimate the power of a selfie." Well, and finally, not all brides can afford a Kardashian-style wedding. But the hottest trend this year at the London Wedding Show is all about getting busy with glue and scissors and creating your own crafty wedding. Brides and bridesmaids learned the ins and outs of crafty tricks in a series of lessons throughout the event. Many brides are even choosing to do their own wedding makeup. They are using the internet to research and watch tutorials on YouTube and picking up tips from professionals. And that is what is trending today. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night. We are able to touch on things that are important to people on an everyday basis. Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. In a lively half hour, news, sports, health, lifestyle information, comments from our viewers. Africa 54, the best for Africa, about Africa. Join us only on VOA.